SanDisk CF Express Type B card, a card that is recommended by many as the card to buy. And of course, I don't think it is, but I'm going to have some stats in this video as I compare it to the AngelBird cards that also have a great price point. So let's look at the numbers and let's see what the numbers tell us. Welcome back to another video. My name is Nikos. Today we are talking about this Extreme Pro by SanDisk, a CFExpress Type B card. Super fast, super quick, and reliable? Maybe, maybe not. Depends on what you need it for. Now, this is another video I'm making on SanDisk, and I promise you this is the last one because I just did a review on this Extreme Pro UHS 2, and we are sending that one back right away. However, this one, oh buddy, this one is fast. 1700 megabytes per second on the read, and of course 1400 megabytes per second on the write. And we don't know what the sustained speed is. It doesn't exist. It's not out there. And if you tell me you know what it is, tell me how you tested it so I know, because the company doesn't even know. I made an effort to reach out to them, and they don't know at all. They don't know. I'm going to show you that transaction of communication. Now, what does this card look like? Well, unlike the UHS 2 SD cards, this one is a Type B. It's a square. Now, this would be used in higher-end cameras like the R5, and is used for big data, like when you're doing 8K or 4K 120 frames, super fast. Now, with the pictures, this thing is like night and day fast. Like, this is awesome, and I can't complain. But there's a caveat there. It overheats. And when I mean it overheats, heats. Like, it causes issues. Now, if you have a high-end camera, you may or may not notice certain things happening with the camera, because at the end of the day, the camera needs a sustained bit rate, and the burst speed comes into play. So the 1400 megabytes per second on this card is burst rate. So when it's writing, it can burst up to 1400, but then you want to go to sustained speed. Now, we don't know what the sustained speed is. Lucky for me, I have a whole bunch of these other cards. I went out and bought a whole bunch of them. There's the Pro from AngelBird. Now, these are 1 terabyte cards, and these are super fast, 1700 megabytes on the read, 1500 on the write, and sustained speed of 1000 megabytes per second. Okay, that's 1000. So I'm going to be doing reviews on all these, so you should be hitting subscribe. This is the SE card. These just came out. This is a 512 gigabyte, and it is 1785 megabytes per second on the read and 850 on the write, with a sustained speed of 800 megabytes per second. And then they came out with this one. This is the version of the fastest you can get, 160 gigabytes, and it's the SX card. 1785 on the read, 1600 on the write, and of course 1480 on sustained speed. So you can literally use this to take so many pictures, and it's meant for pictures, where the other two are meant for a combo of video and pictures. Now, the idea here is that I'm not going to do the comparison really on this, but I will be doing comparisons over all these cards individually, and then a comparison of all. But these two cards are really the ones I'm playing around with on sustained speed to compare, because one is 800 megabytes per second, the other one's 1000. And the assumption is that on this Extreme Pro, that's 1400 megabytes per second on the write, it should be in and around 800 to 1000. All right? So I kind of like bounced between the two, and I was like, all right, for these kind of tests, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to switch over to this other card for the other test, when I saw that the AngelBird, both of those cards, were comparing at the same speed. So, yeah, I'm trying to figure out that sustained speed, and that's it. But there is no sustained speed. Now, the heating issue is a big problem. So if you have this card, you might have noticed that it overheats. But then, because of your type of camera, you may or may not notice some issues with the camera, where sometimes it might not work to what you were expecting to, but then you would think it's the camera because the camera is overheating, but really it might be the card. Now, I'm not talking about the camera overheating and it's causing overheating from the card. I'm saying that the card, when it overheats, may cause issues. See, different material will overheat faster and cause more problems on the transfer speeds. And the materials will cool down rather fast. And we see this with this card, which is great and all. But when you when push comes to shove, it's kind of like, ooh. So we're gonna get into depth with that, and I will show you stats, and then come back to explaining a lot of this so you can put things into perspective for yourself when buying a card. Because the reality is that they've had 2 years to make adjustments to this, and they haven't. In fact, they will ask you to return a card if it's overheating and send you another one. Don't know why, because they're all made the same, from what I understand anyways. But it's interesting and telling that all these creators, once again, that I've watched on buying this card, oh yes, and of course all the people in the reviews, oh it's a great card, and all these professionals comparing them with the other cards, and then and I've seen some later videos where they don't even include it anymore, which is great from some of these creators, great, and then some other top websites. So let's look at the stats. Now, all the tests were done off of this pro grade card reader. It's got the CF Express card and also the SD card. Super fast. I do have a 10 gigabit speed connection with my computer, and of course we do a crystal disk mark first, and this test is running it up at 956 megabytes per second on the read and 486 on the write. Super quick numbers. Now, I never in real testing, I never reached the 956 at all, but we got close. Now, the random speed here drops a little bit, which is okay, however, not optimal. When we're looking at a transfer speed from the card over to the drive, we're getting about 757 megabytes per second, which falls in line with the connection I have. And of course, we have a 4K shoot being sent over to the card at 450 megabytes per second. So again, an average kind of speed based on the connection I do have. Now, if you're looking at this and you're asking, you know, what should I be looking forward to if I did have a faster connection? This should be faster, especially when you're comparing this. This would be hitting up your 20 gigabits per second if you have that with the card reader that you purchase and you have it connected to, say, a USB that can hit 20 gigabytes per second, but usually that's just a Thunderbolt. And then, of course, the write speed would be faster. Now, the idea here would be in my first test that I would be using the SC card to compare images per second. It's 512 gigabytes as well. And we are getting 16 megabytes, 16 images per second on the SanDisk, and a little bit faster, almost up there in some cases to a second, but on average it was 1670.79 on the per image per second on the SC card. So the amount of images you get, well, you're clearly getting more images with the AngelBird 79 compared to the 75.6, and this was right across the board for all the AngelBird cards. And of course, we're going to look at a 3-second burst, and this 3-second burst is raw images from the CFExpress card where it's just cold, it's just running, it's 17.53 images per second, where if I let the video go for a minute and then use the card, we see a slowdown here. It was negligible. One could argue here that this is it overheating. One could argue, but we're going to come to a definition on it. And the idea then becomes, well, what about a 3-second burst with the AngelBird? It does slow down a bit, but not significant enough. Like, this is like very, like, in some test runs I did, it was just a little bit higher. In some cases, so it was just like a plus and minus compared to a full almost half second in most cases with the SanDisk card. Now, when I compare that to the AngelBird, just to put in perspective, this is the Pro version. It's a terabyte card, and we are seeing an increase in speed in this one. And again, it was negligible. It was just plus or minus in all these cards, where the SanDisk was never plus at all. When we're looking at the recovery of the card, now this is you taking pictures, letting go, and waiting for this buffer to clear. The recovery of the SanDisk took 5.458 seconds. On average, it was over 5 seconds no matter what I did. And of course, with RAW and JPEG, we're around 6.736. So a significant increase of about a good second and change. And I can't stress this enough. Like, we're seeing something here that is constant with SanDisk, okay? With JPEGs. Now, when we're looking at it and comparing it to the AngelBird SE, and we're looking at the recovery rates, almost all cards for AngelBird were around 4 seconds, 3.5 to 4 seconds, where all my tests were over that 5-second mark for the SanDisk. Now, look at the difference here with the AngelBird on RAW and JPEG. Significant difference. So if you're shooting anything with JPEG, SanDisk is not the one to be with. And this is what most people with JPEG will usually buy, the SanDisk, because it's a well-reputable name. And the idea here is that every card I've been testing is significantly slower with JPEGs, okay? And that is a big, like, if you're waiting this long, like 2 seconds plus every time, it's killer. It'll catch up to you. Now, where did the problems really start to compile for me? We started to do some tests, and I decided to do some raw images transfers here. And I was writing to the card. We're running around 416 megabytes per second, which, you know, is doable. It's good. And then I look at JPEGs, and we see the decrease here of 349 megabytes per second on average. So that is a big, whoops, that is a big drop from the 416. That's like, you know, we're looking around 60 megabytes per second, and this wasn't just on average. Usually I saw even more when I did these tests, but you know, just a little bit more, but on average this is what I was getting. So that's why I'm showing you these pictures, these images. Now here in the MP4s, this is where we get into a little bit of that quinky dinky situation with overheating. And I noticed this only because when I was doing my test, I was like, is it the card or is it the camera? And I started to play around with the heat and the overheating with the cards, so I can see what the actual scenario was. And it took way longer of a testing than I wanted to do, but hey, here we are. Now, here is your first image where it's the MP4 is transferring, and this is great. It's moving along, and we're good to go. So again, you can see that it's a nice streamlined approach. We can't complain on this. Where does it get bad? Always around this point, we would see that there's a decrease of 76.5 megabytes per second, okay? And this is something that we shouldn't be seeing. When we are seeing this drop around this place, it's a significant drop. So it's not like it's like a simple, hey, it just happened. What occurs? Well, it's almost like there's a cool down period, and then it jumps up for a bit, and then it cools down again, and it will jump up again, kind of thing. But really, it eventually doesn't. And we're stuck at the 75.3 megabytes per second. What occurs with the AGA testing? On average, I would get a 330 and 159. I didn't understand it. I couldn't figure it out. Why was I getting this every so often? And these numbers, now I am testing this out with 16 gigabyte test files. In a cold environment, this would be hitting 744 and 894, so significantly faster than the crystal benchmarks. But this would be hitting 744 on the write, and then of course 894 on the read, which are good numbers, okay? Now, when we're looking at it overheating, it would always default to this, 75 on the write and 160 on the read. And this was always, and I did several tests on that. And the idea now is, why? Why is that happening other than the overheating? There was nothing else I did all the testing I could. And this is where I start to think to myself, well, if this is happening, then it proves a lot of issues that we're having with the card. So this is the communication I had with the company. SanDisk, thank you for staying online, Nico. So this is after a while of talking back and forth. Please be informed that the published read and write speeds are the only information available with us. You can refer to the speed various capacities in the link. The link takes you to where all the cards are listed, where if you buy something like a 100 and, I don't know, 28 gigabyte or a 256 or whatever the cards are, I can't remember now, but I think there's a 256 and a 128 and a 64. So they all reduce in speed on the right, but there's no sustained speed, okay? Again, I continue on. So you don't have any other information on sustained write speed like every other manufacturer has? Unfortunately, read-write speeds information is available with us. Thanks a lot. Even the datasheet doesn't have this. I am using it in the Canon EOS R5, and it seems to be an issue with images. When taking high frame rates, 20 per second, it becomes sluggish after the buffer fills up. The other issue is that when it overheats, it seems to become sluggish. I haven't tested it with the 8K, but the 4K seems to be okay. By overheating, I mean it's hot. Is this normal for this card? Now, they're pretty much the whole time telling me, like, you're an idiot, just use the card. But when I mentioned overheating, if it's overheating to that temperature, I suggest you to please replace the card. And I kind of be cheeky with him. I go, you mean replace it on the camera or replace the card for a new one? I meant replace the card for a new one. Okay, well, I bought it from Amazon, so I will call them to replace it instead of the RMA. And our conversation finishes there. So the idea here is very simple. In any cases with any of these cards, I always have a similar situation. Don't worry, we'll replace it. We have the warranty there. It's almost like we don't want to fix the issues that I'm finding. It's almost like we don't want to deal with anything. And it's driving me insane. So you can see how this overheating issue can cause a big problem, especially when we get into higher end cameras. If you have a camera that's not higher end, you won't see the big issues. But then again, most cameras aren't there yet on the higher end. Okay, so we're talking about the actual big cameras from each manufacturer, not even the R5. We're still waiting for that, big camera from Canon, like the R1 to come out. And you're sitting there and you're going, will the R3 have that issue? I don't know. But what I do know is that these companies are just not caring. Now, AngelBird has been a little bit different. And I'm loving how they are, like I sent them all these stats and they're emailing me and they're like, we've been doing all the tests. Thank you for sending this stuff. And we're going to get back to you. We're trying to figure it out because there's some issues with the cards that I found, but they're not like bad issues. They're just issues where they're not achieving what I'm expecting from their marketing. And, there's tweaks. They're tweaks, not actual big issues, right? So the idea then becomes, well, what are we seeing with these cards? Now, the read speed on the SE card is 581 megabytes per second. So this is transferring to my computer. When I'm transferring back to the card, I'm getting 518 megabytes per second. Awesome, awesome. All right, so it's moving on the, and it should be doing this, right? It should be moving at the right speed back and forth because the speed in essence should be maxing out to the capabilities of my computer, right? So whatever the actual USB speed is. So this is good. I just think this should be higher, and I've noted that to them. Now, when I'm doing a crystal read, it's 659, which is super low, and this shouldn't be there. But the write is 855. So this is kind of like, what's going on there? Again, similar numbers to the SanDisk card. This is where we get interesting. The idea of the AG system in a cooled environment, so the card was just inserted and we run it, it's 776 versus 889 on the read. So the write is pretty fast. When you're looking at this write, again, I'm doing the same kind of tests, and when I compare it over to a hot environment, I place it in there, it's 890 on the read and 783 on the write, which you sit there and you put this into perspective and you go, well, if we look back to the other card, we had to reduce, it reduced to 75 megabytes per second. Now, the other test I should note on the idea of this is that I was testing these cards heavily with the actual reader and leaving the cards in here sometimes. Sometimes I would test them transferring stuff and testing it right away. And sometimes I would leave them cool down to whatever heat this was producing. And the tests were still significant with the SanDisk, where the test with the other cards was not. Now, when we're looking at it in terms of the transfer speeds, this is JPEG, it's running around 345 megabytes per second, and the RAW is at 514 megabytes per second. So this is something I've noted as well to the company. However, when we're looking at the speed, it's not affecting it as much when the camera is in use of it, which is great, and that's awesome. However, we're still seeing a slowdown there, and I shouldn't be seeing that. When I'm looking at it in terms of the video transfer, it's 620 megabytes per second, so a little bit quicker than the SanDisk. We do see a little bit of a dip starting here, but it just picks up, it sustains, and we have absolutely no issue. There is no overheating issue on this, running at an average of 615 megabytes per second. I mean, how can you, this is awesome, just awesome. Now, in comparison, the cold read of the Pro version is hitting the high numbers that we want it to hit, and when it is warm or heated up, it does slow down. Now, this is interesting, and I want to make this point for everybody so they can understand the situation we're in. When we're looking at the 582 megabytes per second on the MP4 on the read, and then the test I wanted to conduct on this Pro card was to see if there's going to be any slowdowns. We do see a couple dips in here. We do see a couple dips. Which is telling us what? The SE is a new card. where this card is 2 years old. Now, when I purchased this 2-year-old card, I opened the box and in it was a 2-year-old card. And I was like, oh, thanks for coming out. Now, here is the thing about this. I called the company and I asked them what's going on, and they're kind of like, we shouldn't have a 2-year-old card out there. So this is where our conversation started on everything. Which brings us to all the different cards that have come out this year, which is the SE and the SX with the new controllers that are being used. And of course, the MK2 of the Pro version that has been upgraded. Now, this one does have the same controllers as the other two cards, and you can get it into 2 terabyte and of course 4 terabyte. It's not available yet, but pre-order. And the idea here is that they've upgraded the controller and they've made this so that it is actually hitting 1785 on the read, 1550 on the write. Super fast in that regards, and of course the sustained speed is 1300 megabytes per second, which overall like really puts everything into perspective of what you really want here in a card. And if this is going to be performing as good as it says it will, then man, I'm super happy at the price point, because at the end of the day, it's the price point that matters. Now, again, the cards here, the SEs and the SXs of 179 and 99, where you look at a 1 terabyte being at 479.99. Very competitive, great price point. And right here, you can look at this and say, if you have an R5, you get the R5C, you can now record for a while here at a good price point. So overall, I'm just super happy to see this. I can't wait to get the MK2s to test these out. That's where we're at with that. So to just put everything into perspective, and really, I don't want to rant on this. I don't want to rant on it. And I'll probably make another SanDisk video as I make the other reviews and I talk more to the other company. But these got to go back, and I'm not going to be using SanDisk for a while. I would love to try out a newer card when it comes out to see if they made improvements, just to see if the company cares. But I doubt they will. I don't see anything happening. If you have one of these cards, this is not to discourage you and just say, oh, you bought a shitty card. Okay, you did. But it's not that bad. You're not going to notice it offhand. Will there be situations where you might? Yes. Now, has this locked up my camera once or twice? Okay. Has the other cards locked it up? Well, the older versions, the 1DX version of the AngelBird has, and there's a firmware to be done. When that is occurring, yeah, it locks it up, and that's what the company told me. They also told me that, the idea of these new cards at a nice price point will be sufficient for the R5. And the tests I found, they're comparing them now so they can do more work and figure that stuff out, which is awesome. Where SanDisk just doesn't care. And you sit there and you're like, well, AngelBird, okay, is an example of that company that is where SanDisk was years ago. ProGrade is an example of that company where SanDisk was years ago, okay? They got bought out by a bigger company, and the bigger company goes, we fix it by not caring. We fix it by moving forward. And this is very critical to think about how this fits the narrative. I want to make sure that you are looking at this in the right way. And by right way, I mean, think about it in terms of what you're planning on buying down the road. If you've already bought one of these, it's still good. It's not that it's bad. But if you're thinking about it, kind of like these SD cards, the idea here is this what I really need right now? Is this what I want? Should I be investing more into this company? Or should I be looking at the tests like somebody like me has been doing and be saying, hey, maybe these aren't the cards for us anymore? Maybe I should be looking at the other companies and saying, what can I do with the other companies? Because that would be a better opportunity for me. If you're using the SanDisk SD cards, look at the stats from my previous video and you will see why you shouldn't be buying that again. In this case, this overheating, I'm sorry, but it's unacceptable for what I'm seeing. And yes, all these cards will overheat, but it's how they transfer things and maintain that transfer rate. And the guarantee on the box, this is why they probably don't put it on there for SanDisk, because they know that this will happen. So how can you guarantee a sustained read speed? These ones are. So I want to put that into perspective. I want you guys to take a step back and start to be more in line with actively looking at what you're buying, doing your research, because this is money. And if we're trying to build a business, I'm bringing it back to business here because I see this a lot, and I see this with other creators, and I see this a lot with other people trying to build a business. Say you're going to go buy more of these cards and you need to invest because you need more of that opportunity as it presents itself, so you're ready to go. I bought the R6. I got like 6 SD cards ready to go. Okay? I've bought all these cards and I'm testing them out, but I need to have, at least 2 to 4 cards for the R5 because I'm going to go out there and do an 8K shoot. What am I going to do? I'm going to go out there and do a 4K shoot. What am I going to do? I got to back up everything. What am I going to do? And what would I be doing if I had the crappy cards like SanDisk, where everything's slowing down and I can't even take pictures at that rate? Like, oh my God, it's killer. It's decision making here, time, energy, and money. How are you investing this? Because we're watching all these big YouTubers, we're watching all these people online talk about XYZ, and the reality is that we don't know the truth behind what they're saying. They might be ignorant or they just might be paid off. And by paid off, I mean they're being paid to do stuff, and they're not really looking into the specifics of everything they're doing. They're not looking into it, and then they're recommending stuff like it's a firm thing. I use SanDisk because it's the best. I've always used SanDisk. It's not the case anymore, buddy. It's done. That dream is dead. We're seeing it. Again, my relationship is really tarnished with SanDisk. I'm really disappointed. I hope this opens up the eyes to people who are planning on buying it. I wanted to make this video and these sets of videos so that people are aware of what it takes to find good products. It's not doable anymore. It's not as easy as it used to be. And the idea here is that if you're trying to build a business, if you're trying to establish yourself, if you're trying to grow, and even if you are just like somebody who just picked up a camera and started moving, the question is, why are you not buying the best for you? That's it. So, subscribe for more of these videos. I will be making more on the AngelBirds. I will be doing more reviews on a whole bunch of stuff that I'm doing, and I'm going to be introducing a whole bunch of videos on how to do things, especially with business and my creative side of stuff. Comment below, like, subscribe, and of course, when you do comment, talk about something like your experience with these cards so other people can get some feedback on the matter, whether it's good, pro, negative, cons, against what I'm saying, for what I'm saying. Let's have a discussion. Write it down as a discussion way so we can open up dialogue so we can understand what's happening. And of course, watch these 2 videos.